Okay, so today we're going to start in on exercise 214. I gave you two handouts. One is exercise 214, the other is your assignment 202. For assignment 202, you're going to make a physical model that looks something like one of these. You've probably seen these being done before. I've consistently got feedback from people that have moved on, have left DVC, that this is one of the most valuable things that they ever learned. So I'm going to make sure that you really understand it and get it. Whenever you have to make kind of a complex site, and one of the unfortunate things about the way the program's set up here is you very rarely have really complicated sites. It's usually relatively urban or relatively flat sites through 121 and through 220, and even the skyscraper studio is a relatively flat San Francisco lot. When you move on to Berkeley, they love to throw you examples like this where you have lots of contour, lots of terrain to deal with, and being able to make really quickly a good topographic model will save you a ton of time. So that's what we're going to go through. It also happens to double up really nicely in terms of how do you work with complex two-dimensional curving surfaces. And so it kind of teaches you a bunch, but at the same time you get a really good reward out of it. So this is what you're going to be making for assignment 202. I will walk you through over the next several class days how this happens, and we'll spend more time. We'll get the basics down today. Next class we'll spend a lot of time really in how do you make the physical model and get it ready to cut. You will then go cut by yourself in the laser cutting lab with the technicians that will help you set this stuff up. Shouldn't be too hard. It will only take 2 sheets of cardboard maximum, so it's really not an expensive project, which is kind of the whole idea of it. I will do a test cut and bring in a sample set that's been cut, and I will assemble it in front of you so you see how you glue it together. So anyway, I'll leave these up here so you can have a look at what you're going to be creating. I used to have more examples, but I guess I got rid of them or whatever. So anyway, there's a couple examples that you can take a look at, and like I said, I'll go through and kind of walk you through it. Today we're going to talk a little bit about working with SketchUp and Rhino together. And before I get into SketchUp and Rhino, I would like to explain SketchUp a little bit better in the context of Rhino, in that SketchUp builds what are called triangulated surfaces. So there's not actually a smooth curved surface that can be created in SketchUp. It will always approximate that curvature with a bunch of triangles, and it will always be faceted. You've probably seen this in SketchUp before anyway. Rhino, however, obviously you've learned by now, can create perfectly smooth curving surfaces. So when we have a SketchUp file and we want to work with it in Rhino, we have to do some transformations to make it a really good smooth surface to begin with. SketchUp does, however, contain a bunch of built-in great topographic information in its terrain feature, and we'd like to take advantage of that. It is by no means perfectly accurate, but it's kind of close, and it would be a good place to start without some kind of a topographic survey to begin with. And so I'm not going to make you build terrain from a topographic survey, but that would be how you would do it if you had an actual site in reality. But for the design stages, it's always pretty easy to work directly from SketchUp. So I'm going to go ahead and open SketchUp. I think the most current version on these computers is 2013, but I'm going to double check because things always change a little bit. Yeah, it looks like I have SketchUp 2013. Hopefully you do too. And so this is not a class that's on SketchUp, but I'm going to walk through the basics of SketchUp to get you to where we're getting rid of the terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the architectural design in feet and inches under my template, and I'll go ahead and start using SketchUp. One of the key parts about picking the architectural design template is your units will be in feet and inches. When we go into Rhino, your units are going to be in inches, so we just want to make sure everything matches nicely. Okay? So, yes, that's wonderful. You can remind me of that later. And so now I end up with kind of the generic SketchUp start scene. We have no need for the architect or whoever the person is that shows up in your particular scene. So I've just selected that person and I'm pressed delete to make sure that person goes away. All we really care about is the terrain part of this. And so if we go up to the toolbar, and hopefully your toolbar looks similar to this, there should be what's called add location. It looks like a little piece of a map. Anybody not see it? Let me just take a quick look. You may have to bring up the large tool set. It's under, hold on, I always forget. View, toolbars, and then you can check large tool set. And so it should be this icon right here. It's like a map that's folded. And when I click on that add location, it brings up a map, and I can specify a particular location. We're looking today for something that is hilly. I'm going to pick Yosemite because Yosemite Valley is inherently hilly. But you could pick, somewhere on the coast. You could pick a lot of different sites. You could pick somewhere in Tahoe. I don't really care where you're getting this terrain information from. It's just important to pick something that's relatively hilly. All right, so I just picked up Yosemite here. And when I zoom out a little bit, we can kind of see the photographic view of Yosemite Valley. This would be Half Dome if you're familiar with Half Dome. Don't pick Half Dome as your terrain example. It's too steep and won't work in Rhino correctly. So you want something not quite that steep. The other thing that's important to recognize is that when I zoom out, the further I zoom out, I get this little white box. That's the maximum amount of terrain I can take. And so as I zoom in, that white box goes away, and then I can take more or less of the terrain. So I'm going to pick something, I don't know, something maybe like that. Includes part of the valley floor. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Select Region. And it's going to give me the maximum amount I can select there. And I'll click on Grab. And when I do that, and I wait for a little bit, it brings in the terrain into SketchUp. And by default, it still shows up kind of as an image, a flat plane that's flat. I can, however, turn on the terrain so we can see what it looks like. So let me go to, I think it's under Edit, File, Geolocation, Show Terrain. And I'll get a sense for what my terrain looks like. Okay, that's probably a little bit steep for Rhino to like. We're into kind of cliff range here. So maybe I'll pick a different region. Go ahead and get rid of this, and I'll pick something else. Not quite as steep. Oh, it's locked. Maybe something like that. And again, I have too much of that. So, hold on, I'll find something. All right, that should work.
How are you getting it to do a 3D thing?
So if I want the 3D thing, I have to go to File, Geolocation, Show Terrain. Okay. And okay, so I have a piece. Maybe this is going to end up too steep, but we're going to go with it for right now. We can kind of see that that's my little piece of the valley. That's what we're going to end up using. Okay, so one of the things is when I do the export, I have to make sure that I'm saving this as a SketchUp 7 file. Rhino plays much better with SketchUp 7 than the later versions of it. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Save As. And I'm going to save this, instead of just a regular SketchUp, I'm going to go back a couple versions to SketchUp version 7. And I'm going to save it onto my flash drive. And this is 214. And I'll go ahead and click Save. So again, that's a SketchUp version 7 file that I'm creating with this. And we'll be patient while the computer thinks about saving here. Alright, so it's saved the file for me. Now I'm going to minimize SketchUp and I'm going to go ahead and open Rhino. And I'm going to do a large object, inches. Alright, so I have Rhino open, and now it's time to bring in that SketchUp file. So I'll go up to File, and then Import. Remember, we do want to make sure I'm in inches. So I am in inches. I'm going to go to File, and then Import. And I'm going to specify that SketchUp file. Okay? And I'll go ahead and say Open. And this is the SketchUp Import Options dialog box. And do I want to bring it in as trimmed planes or do I want to bring it in as a mesh? I'm going to choose mesh as it comes in, which is basically that faceted set of triangles that I've been talking about. And it can go ahead and join the edges and the faces. That looks fine. So I'll say OK. And it can take a little bit of time to come in. And when it comes in, I'm going to zoom selected. And we will see that I have an object that's come in. So let me go ahead and switch to shaded mode here for a second. It brought in some extra little pieces. I'm just going to go ahead and delete those for right now. I don't care about them, but I do want to take a look at this terrain. And so if we look at this closely, can you see how instead of being a nice smooth surface, it's built up of all those little faceted triangles? Okay, that's the nature of a SketchUp file. It's going to come in with these little points. And so we want to convert this from what's called a mesh, which is what it is right now, into a nice smooth NURBS surface. And so that's the piece of this puzzle that we were going to be playing around with today. So I have the original SketchUp file. I want to take a quick look at my layers and kind of get organized before I start on this process. And the first thing that I'm going to do is take a look at what layer this is currently on. It should be on layer 0, I believe. There it is. And so let's rename layer 0 to be SketchUp Terrain. And I do that to kind of clarify what is what, because I'm going to end up with lots of different versions of terrain as I go forward. I also want to make sure that the rest of the layers that don't matter here are either turned off or deleted. And so I'm going to go through and actually delete a bunch of these layers. And then I'll create new layers as we go forward. Okay? So I have my object here. The next thing that I need to do is I'm going to actually follow Rhino 5.23 and Rhino 5.24, which are both on the website here. And this just goes through saving from SketchUp and getting your output here. And what I'm going to do, right? Oh, that's fine. I'm going to skip ahead to 5.24, and I'm going to create a surface using a curved network. And so you guys have already done curved networks, right, to create your pillows or whatever. We're going to do the same thing, only with a much larger object with many more curves. So I'm going to use a command that's called the contour command. And what a contour command does is it takes any existing object and it derives a bunch of curves from it at certain intervals. And so this will start to make sense as I go forward. It's going to be under curve, curve from objects, and then contour. Or you can type contour. And it's going to first say select objects for contours. I'm going to pick my mesh, which is right here, and I'll hit enter. And it's going to say what's the base point. And I want it to be that corner. But since it's a mesh, I can't snap to an end point because it's not a surface. So I'm going to turn on knot and vertex as two of my object snaps, which will allow me to snap right to that corner. Okay? And I'll click on that corner, and then it's going to ask me for the direction perpendicular to the contour lines. So if I had an object, right, let's say I have an object that's like this, right, and I want to create a bunch of curves that slice through the object at a certain distance apart, something like this. right? When it's asking for direction perpendicular to the contours, it's saying which direction. So this would be parallel to the contours. So what is this axis, right? What's perpendicular to the contours? So we'll call this perpendicular to contour. Okay, so I'm going to specify a line that goes in this direction. Now I want to make sure that I don't snap to somewhere else on this object. I want to be way off here in space so it's actually just parallel to one of the axes. And I'll click. Okay? Then it's going to say what is the distance between the contours. And so this is a little bit of a guess because I don't know how big the terrain is yet, but I'm going to say maybe 100 feet. So I'll type 100 followed by the foot sign, and I'll hit enter, and it will then divide up that terrain, right, into a bunch of curves. So let me turn off the SketchUp terrain, and we can now see that there's a bunch of curves running in one direction. Does that kind of make sense for what it did? Okay. I will then, let me rename the default layer here to be contour 1. And I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this contour 2. Move it up 1. And I'm going to create the same set of contours, but going in the opposite direction. Okay? So let's turn back on the SketchUp, turn off contour 1, and I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to go back that direction. So we're going to repeat contour. It's curve, curve from objects, contour. That's my object again. I'm going to start at that vertex, and I'm going to go off in this direction this time. I'm going to specify the same distance, 100 feet. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and it will create a second set of lines going this direction. So if I turned off the SketchUp terrain layer and turned back on, right, my contours, we'd see that I have kind of like a mesh of lines, okay, that are going in both directions. If I look at this in the top view, oops, hold on a second. Right, if I look straight down on this object, my lines should be perpendicular, right, if I did it correctly. I'm a little concerned because I have some lines that don't look quite perfect, but we'll go with it for right now. But if we look at the edges, you can see how they're a little bit ragged on each of those ends. I want those to be nice and clean so that I can use it for a curved network. So I'm going to do some trims. I'm going to select an object that's close to that goes all the way across here. I'll type trim, and I'm going to select everything that intersects it. Like that. I'll repeat the process on each side. And I'm just going to do them all at once here. Oops. Trim. Alright. Now I have to do a little bit of cleanup because I've got a few extra lines here that need to go away. So we'll delete those and we'll delete those. And what that did is it gave me a nice strong line on each of the edges of these curved networks. You kind of see that? It encapsulated it nicely. So when I go to do the curved network of this object, I'll have a nice contained object with no ragged edges, no lines sticking out past the sides, which won't work for the curved network. Okay, so before you move into the next phase and actually do the curved network, save your work, because it used to be about 80% of the time Rhino would crash. Now it's more like 10% of the time Rhino will crash. So you just want to be aware and not have to redo anything. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Save, and make sure that I save this before I move forward. And I'll go ahead and click Save. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this, terrain, something like that. I'll make that the active layer. Again, SketchUp terrain is turned off. I have contour 1 and contour 2 both on, and I'm going to select all of the objects like this, and I'm going to go to Surface, Curved Network. Right? You've done this before. When I do this, it's going to say, oh boy, this is going to be a hard one for me. Are you sure you want me to do it anyway? And you say, yes, I do. And then we wait. Right? And if we did it well, if we did a good job with our contour command, we'll get A, B, C, and D. Right? We'll end up with loose here. We'll end up with 0.01 and 0.1. We can adjust these so the edge curves could be at 0.1 if it crashes. But for right now, I'm going to leave the defaults. If it crashes, we'll make that tolerance is less. But for right now, we'll leave it. I'll go ahead and say OK. And again, we will wait. And this can take a while as well. Right? Probably longer than the first part of it. It will look like nothing's happening up here, and you'll get the little swirly thing. And so, again, we just kind of hang out for a while and are patient. When it finishes, we'll get something that looks an awful lot like this, and your computer will get really, really slow for a time. Okay? So if I go to zoom in, we'll have to be very patient while it zooms in. And if I click on the surface that it created, it's going to turn entirely yellow. Okay? That's because this is a very dense grid of a surface. It's got a lot of U and V value to it. We want to, once it's selected, type rebuild, okay, which is step 3 in your exercise 214 handout. And we're going to specify a point count for U and V. And so I'm going to go 200 by 200. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And the density is going to get far less, and the computer is going to speed up and allow us to work. Okay? So now that I'm at that point, I want to kind of illustrate some of the differences of what we've done. So let me turn off Contour 1 and Contour 2. And I have a nice, smooth NURBS surface that's here. Okay? And if we look at it closely, you can see how it kind of smoothed off a lot of the points. Okay? If I turn back on the SketchUp terrain, and actually let me make this SketchUp terrain a different color here. Sorry. Yeah, it's going to be annoying. If I look at this, right, we can see what parts have been smoothed out. Right? So you can see the pointed triangulations here have been smoothed over a bit by Rhino. Right? So we're losing a little bit of data. We're changing what this surface looks like as we smooth it. If I take this surface and instead of rebuilding at 200 by 200, I rebuild at 100 by 100. Right, I'll say OK. It will get even more smooth, right? And I'll get less and less detail. So if we toggle on and off, you can see how smooth that peak is starting to become, right? Versus the original, which is very faceted. Okay? If I rebuild it further, maybe 50 by 50. It's going to get a lot smoother. Right? There's almost no holdovers of those little triangles, right, in comparison to where the triangles were. But we're approximating the terrain a lot more. So the lower those rebuild values are, the more approximate the terrain is becoming, but also the smoother it is becoming. So you're looking for kind of a happy medium. The 100 by 100 seems pretty good. It seems pretty smooth, right? And so now I have a NURBS surface, an actual Rhino surface that I can work with, which is a big part of what we're trying to get to today. So to continue on, we're going to continue practicing with a few more things, and that is that I'm going to do the contour command once again, but this time I'm going to create contours that will make topography lines. So you guys have looked at surveys before, you've looked at maps before, you understand that traditional contour lines or topography lines, right, go up in the Z direction and tell us how steep something is. So I'm going to go ahead and build some for myself. I'm going to use the contour command again. It's under curve, curve from objects, contour. Or again, you can just type contour. It's going to say select objects. I'm going to select my NURBS surface, not my SketchUp object. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And it's going to say choose contour base point, we'll once again pick that corner. And this time, instead of going in the X direction or the Y direction, we're going to go in the Z direction. So to do that, I need to be able to see the Z direction. There it is. All right, we're going to go straight up in the Z direction. And I'm going to specify whatever my contour interval is. And next class, we'll talk about how do you pick what the contour interval is. For right now, I'll pick something like 40 feet, maybe, and we'll see how it does. So I'll hit 40 feet, and I'll hit enter. And it will then build all of those little contours for me. Right? And so this will look a lot like a traditional piece of topography on a survey or something like that. Okay? And so these intervals are every 40 feet as we go up in that particular piece of terrain. Okay? I probably should have put those on their own layer, so let me go ahead and make my own layer. Change object layer. And now they're on this layer. Let me turn off the terrain here and we can see them. Okay? To confirm that they worked correctly, right, we can look at them in the side view, and as we look at them in the side view, they should all be perfectly straight, right, because that represents those topography lines. Okay? So there it is. It's looking pretty good. The next piece of it is a lot of times you'll want to export these to AutoCAD or something like that to be able to use them as part of your drawing process. Because right now they're in 3 dimensions, I want to project them to be flat. So I'm kind of prepping you with a lot of the steps that we're going to do, but we'll be far more specific next class about how you pick what values. But I'll go ahead and create a new layer, and we'll call this AutoCAD. I'll make that layer active, and I'm going to build a surface, just a basic rectangular corner to corner, larger than my contours. There it is. I'll then select all of those contours. There they are. And in the top view, I'm going to use the project command to project those lines onto the flat surface. All right, which it just did. And if I turn off those, we'll see that now I have a flat set of topography lines that could be exported to AutoCAD. I'm going to go ahead and export those. They're selected. I'll go to File, Export Selected. And instead of being a Rhino file, I'm going to specify an AutoCAD DWG file. And we'll go ahead and call this Exercise 214. I'll go ahead and click Save. The default options here are fine, though I tend to pick 2004 polylines as my export. I'll go ahead and say OK, and that will then build an AutoCAD file that we can work with. Okay? I recognize that the AutoCAD file doesn't mean a whole lot to you right now. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll get to how to work with the AutoCAD file. I just want you to have gone through the practice of projecting and that sort of thing. Okay? So after you've gotten through this phase and done the projection, what I want you to do for the remainder of the time is to build some kind of a little meditation pavilion, a little shack, a little something that looks exciting to you on this site somewhere, and then do a few renderings and post those renderings along with the AutoCAD file by the end of class today. Okay? There's no specific program for this. It's just meant for you to have some fun and build something and practice in Rhino. Again, the purpose today is to get the SketchUp file into Rhino, build the new surface from it. Next class, right, if I can encourage you not to miss a single day this year, next class would probably be one of the most critical days that you're here because it's a really good overview of how you build this and how you create all the stuff that you're going to need, right? So we'll go through that next class, and that'll be exercise 215. Are there any questions? No? Okay.